Hello guys, this is your friend from ninjavibeZ and we are back with a new fanfic, which is what if Naruto rose as the Alpha Jinchūriki and chose Hinata and Hanabi as his Foxbound Queens Part 4. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Team 7 tore through the trees, aiming to get as close to the central tower as they could, and from there stage ambushes and raids to acquire an Earth Scroll. However, look at that. 3 of the weaklings, a team of Tani, Joy, just a look at the 3, told them that they shouldn't be there. No effort to remain hidden, postures that showed no readiness to fight. Overall, they looked like poor kids that thought they had what it took to be a Tunin. Hey, asked Nar, when was your first kill? The sudden change in attitude calmed the 3 down. The question even more. Why are you talking about? Asked one, only Chunin kill people, so never killed anyone. No, too bad. As one, the 3 members of Team 7 threw a kunai, each nailing a tiny shinobi in the forehead. Yeah, they looked like poor kids, but they were shinobi. And lifesay_, they looked through their pouch and pulled out a heaven scroll. Well, the hunt continues. First, Nar, could you please change out of this? Asked Sakura, glaring at the orange monstrosity. Smoke erupted out of Naruto and he was once again in his usual battle attire. Done. Sasaki looked at him for a moment. Didn't know you could make a henge so discreet. It's less than greater than a skill I worked on in provision of this HN. Before leaving, they scavenged the 3 Tani Shinobi's emergency pack, medical supplies, and weapons just in case. Once it was done, they darted through the tress again at top speed. They were nearly halfway to the tower when things got a lot worse. A sudden gust of wind slammed into Nar, nearly sending him sailing through the air, but he managed to stick to the tree. They were on with the use of chakra. Cuckoo, it looks like you are better than we thought. A gigantic snake appeared just behind them while a kunoichi appeared in front of them. Quickly, they adopted a triangular formation with Naruto facing the snake, Sasaki, the kunoichi, and Sakura keeping the lookout while being ready to support her teammates. Cuckoo, impressive. It seems you trained them well. Sasaki tensed a bit. This person thought of him as the leader and possibly most dangerous element of the squad. He could use that to his advantage. However, he needed to know what he was up against, and something wasn't right. First off, no genin should be able to summon a snake this size, especially one from a minor village like Kusa. Second, the snake contract had been in Konoha originally, more precisely in the hands of the traitorous member of the Sonin, Orochimaru. And lastly, his guts were telling him was about to hit the fan. Sasaki said Sakura, I believe we are facing Orochimaru. The skills match, and the body language is not feminine but masculine. We need support. High-level support. Sasaki nodded. But it was easier said than done. Guys, said Nar, I think I have a way, but I'll need you to cover for me. Sakura spun in front of Nar facing the snake and Sasaki unsealed his chakudo, pulling it from a seal on his belt and got ready while Naruto sat in lotus position. Cuckoo, and you think I'll let you, said Orochimaru with a smile, removing the now useless face of the Kusukunichi. He flicked his wrist. The snake dived at them. Sakura jumped to meet it midway. She closed her eyes for a second. And as they reopened, steel filled them, twisting nimbly in the air and launching her legs up, she avoided being swallowed and found herself over the snake's head. She brought both of her elbows down, impacting the top of the summon's head. With a sickening crack and a wet ripping sound, flesh and bones gave out, and the snake's head was propelled to the earth below. Twisting yet again, Sakura brought her feet on the still suspended neck of the deceased reptile and somersaulted back to her team. Orochimaru failed to contain his shock, letting it clearly apparent on his face. What? He hissed. Beheaded with an elbow strike. Interesting and strange. There were similarities with technique, yet there were differences. The explosive force of Tsunade's punches was absent. This technique achieved similar results but seemed to rely on amplification of momentum through chakra along with muscle strengthening. Fascinating. Being curious, Orochimaru unleashed his killing intent upon the genin, wanting to see their reaction. As expected, Sasuke powered through without too much trouble, but he was shocked to see Nar simply not responding and Sakura standing unfazed. Oh, no reaction. Nar is too far in his mind and cannot perceive it. He wouldn't be affected anyway, said Sakura in a strange voice. It fascinated Orochimaru. It was empty, yet there was still someone behind those eyes. It held no warmth, yet wasn't cold. It was a complete contradiction. Fascinating indeed. And you? He asked curiously. Killing intent influences the parts of the brain that are related to emotions, mostly fear. Those parts of my brain are currently deactivated, she said plainly. Orochimaru felt giddy. This was far more than he expected from this team. He wondered what little Nar had in stock. That's when chakra erupted from said blonde, bursting into a shroud of pure power. 4 tails appeared. The bark beneath him blackened. Then suddenly, 3 retracted as Naruto exploded to his feet, turning in midair to face him. A red projectile left the blonde from behind at such speed that even Orochimaru couldn't follow it. It worried him. It could be anything, but he suspected a technique that would come back like a boomerang when he expected it the least. That's when he saw Naruto pull out the 2 parts of his bladed staff and his eyes widened. Uzumaki Naruto was Kitsune and he hadn't been informed. Barely an hour ago, Kabuto had confirmed that he was a weaken. Dull-witted genin and suddenly he became Sasake's equal in skills. I take it Kabuto works for you, said Nar calmly, looking at him dispassionately. Oh, Kabuto-chan had his cover busted by a couple genin. That's the first time I see a spy dumb enough to pull such a bad act. No one having gone through the exams 7 times would have come to talk to us after Ino's stunt, especially not to pit half the room against us. Add to that intel on the Suna gentry that even we don't have. It was obvious that he's a spy working for a third party. It is a miracle he wasn't caught just yet with such poor discretion. Ah, it seems he underestimated your minds and thought he could compromise himself without consequences. He will not make such mistakes in the future. I will make sure of. At that moment, Orochimaru jumped back to avoid the bolts of lightning that struck the branch he stood on, completely obliterating the wood and causing what wasn't burnt, vaporized, or still attached to the tree to fall to the ground. Next to Team 7, Hinata, Hanabi, and Atsui landed. Quote, said Hanabi. That was our fastest jutsu. You better have a plan, honey, because if you don't, we're less than greater than screwed. No worry, sweetie. Kurama's taking care of it, Nar mumbled back. We need to hold on for a few minutes. Faster. Always faster. While he was concentrating on that, he couldn't help the kit. He needed to go faster. He flew over the fence of the forest, startling the John and Proctor. He didn't care. He had enough trouble maintaining his physical form as it was. Now that he was in flat terrain, he accelerated even more, reaching the town in a moment, darting through the streets, too fast to be picked up by civilians, but startling anyone above Chunin. He didn't care. He needed to keep enough chakra to do his job. He reached the building at inhuman speed, but still too slow for his tastes. He followed his senses. He could feel her nearby just after this turn. She looked at the sky. She had been looking at the sky for such a long time. Sometimes she dreamed of sun-kissed hair, of two little girls, of fur, and of pranks sometimes. But most of the time she looked at the sky in the cold. Did she mention it was horribly cold? Sometimes there was something, someone maybe, that brought warmth. It used to be somewhat regular, but she missed this warmth. It hadn't come in such a long time. The cold was so constant, it was horrible. She wished for this warmth to come so that she could sleep and dream again. A smile came to her lips. She could feel that warmth coming closer and warmer than ever. She felt an impact. The air was driven from her lungs. The sky seemed to move. The ground slammed against her back. Two red eyes replaced the sky. Wake up. Her eyes opened. Instinct took over. She rolled with the impact that came from who cares where. She got to her feet in an instant. She was performing shunshin before she even registered the fact her legs were weak. When the technique died down, she stumbled through their room, getting her stuff quickly and efficiently. She couldn't wait. She had to go there, wherever that was. She felt compelled to. She ripped the hospital gown, put on her old Jonin outfit, and grabbed her weapon. She opened the window, automatically deactivating the security seals, and sprang to the rooftops. She could feel her body getting its strength back as the blazing heat she now noticed receded. She felt something strange. She realized her face was distorted by rage. She didn't know why, just that she felt rage. As she tore through the air, she saw several Jonin on her way. They looked at her in shock and fear and seemed to want to stop her. Why did those morons stand in her way? She didn't have time for that. She weaved around them. Something caught her eyes. Something gray. She heard something loud. She realized it was her voice. Kakashi, move your startled patch of gray jumped after her, struggling to keep up. She didn't care. By now she could sense in the back of her mind about 2 squads of Ambu running after her along with 24 Jonin. Like she cared, she reached it, not slowing down one bit to jump over the fence. She felt the way, weaving through the trees with purpose. Then she saw him, and her fury knew no bound. And now she knew why she was enraged. She knew why she would fight, why she would kill. She swung her arm, bringing the full weight of her weapon to bear against the pathetic twig in her prey's hand. Don't touch my son, Cuckoo. Whatever your plan is, it will fail, said Orochimaru. He appeared confident, but he remained careful. He didn't know exactly what that red blur had been, only that the Cloud team had arrived shortly after. While the Fox girls were fascinating, he had other things to focus on than his urge to dissect them. He vomited his sword and took it in his right hand before beckoning them to come. They exchanged a few glances. Then Sasaki charged him up front while Nar attacked from the right and the Fox girls with a Tonto from the left. The blonde boy from Kumo quickly circling him to attack from behind. A safe strategy, but not good enough against him. With a smirk of derision, he parried every strike with ease, batting them aside like it was nothing, not even moving from his spot. That's when Sasaki ducked and he felt an impact in his left shoulder. He looked in shock at the place where it used to be, only mangled and ripped flesh remaining. He looked at the pink one, seeing her throw a rock in the air and punch it toward him. He quickly substituted with a mud clone, watching in morbid fascination as it was obliterated. They all turned to him, and he felt now was a good time to get his arm back. He activated his technique and shed his skin, finding himself with his 2 arms back. However, as he was emerging from the old skin, he felt impacts on his back and lost control of his chakra in this region. With a hiss of annoyance, he rolled away before the second Hyuga could close his chakra network any more than she already had, cursing himself for forgetting her. After some efforts and awkward jumps, he managed to completely shed his old skin, but he had been forced to drop Kusanagi in the process. With a burst of speed, he seized the blade and brought it down on the Hyuga that had attacked him, only for the blonde to appear in her place and burst in smoke when the Kusanagi cut him in half. That was unpleasant, said Nar. Orochimaru looked at them in fascination. He did not expect such an interesting fight. He thought it would be boring, that only Sasuke would have any kind of skills. Instead, he found himself confronted by two students of the gauntlet, two pseudo-Jinchūriki and a genin capable of shutting down parts of her brain and punch rocks past the wall of sound. Indeed, very interesting is one that charged against Sasuke and Naruto in the head of the attack, the pink one and the blonde of Kumo behind them on each side, and the two Hyuga closing the formation most likely to take advantage of any opening he left. Sasaki jumped high, bringing his Chikudo down on him while Nar spun low, aiming to lop off his legs. He used his left hands to deviate Sasake's attack and the Kusanagi to block Nar. However, he did not expect Nar to immediately spin in the opposite direction and drive his feet in his stomach, putting him in a difficult position to block the blonde swordsman's overhead strike and the pinket's obviously powerful punch and the follow-up attack from the Hyuga twins. Though he managed to parry everything, but the Tonto-wielding one took him by surprise when she threw a fistful of powder at his face. He jumped back to regroup and was surprised to taste blood in his mouth. He also felt something sticky but somewhat liquid in his nose, and he quickly reached the logical conclusion. Hemorrhagic combined with anticoagulation. He saw the frown on the face of the girl that threw the powder. He couldn't resist the urge to smirk. It is useless, girl. I am immune to poisons. No matter how interesting this was, he came for a reason, and he couldn't wait too long. Konoha was bound to find out about his presence. He jumped forward, intent on incapacitating Nar, but that was not to be. From the corner of his eye, he caught a red blur, only much larger than the one that left Nar. He came to a screeching halt and raised his sword in defense, only to find himself propelled quite a distance away. Don't touch my son. When he stopped, he looked up and saw something that made him pale. The 2 squads of Anbu, he could fight. The 24 Jonin, he could survive and escape. But all of that in addition to her. Before him stood Uzumaki Kasha, an expression of unbridled fury on her face. Both her hands clutched around the handle of her Tetsubo, a faint red light coming off of her. Orochimaru knew very well her record. She had been a possible choice for the spot of Yandai Hokage and did not think he could take her on when there were so many ninja ready to support her, amongst which was Kakashi. However, letting him go was not part of her plans. With a roar that shook the forest, she dived forward, her war club ready to crush him. Using chakra to strengthen his muscles, Orochimaru sent his sword crashing against her weapon, but only ended up being hurled back like a rag doll. He righted himself just in time to avoid a palm charged with chakra, no doubt prepared to lay on him a very harmful and painful seal, and tried to take advantage of the opening offered to stab her through the heart. But she nimbly twisted around him, spinning around him and slamming her Tetsubo in his back, sending him flying forward. Kakashi activated his Chidori and jumped down, intent on being the spike on which he would be impaled. With speed befitting an S-rank shinobi, Orochimaru shed his skin, diving down to avoid death. But apparently, fury did not cloud Kush's mind too much because she was already at his side. A vicious smirk on her face as she slammed her club into his ribs, sending him crashing through a tree. 5 Jonin sent various A-rank fire techniques his way. 3 others supplementing the assault with B-rank wind techniques, turning the tree he had gone through and the one he had crashed in into a cloud of ash in the wind. Orochimaru rose from the ground with a grunt. He had used a lot of chakra to survive this. He wouldn't be able to suffer much more. A blonde-haired woman appeared before him, a shroud of red chakra oozing off her as her nails turned into claws and crackled with lightning. Before he had time to push her back, he had to dodge her many and dexterous claw swipes. Kakashi appeared behind him, roundhousing him into cushions. Tetsubo just as it burst into blue flames. In desperation, Orochimaru brought his sword up, hoping it would be enough to avoid death. It was, but he was still sent flying a dozen meters away, and he heard the shocking sound of Kusanagi snapping in half. That was the last straw. As fast as he could, he rose a barrier to block off the onslaught of high-level ninjutsu sent his way by the group of Jonin and Ambu and performed a shunshin. As he got his bearing back, he looked around himself, seeing that he was on the other side of Konoha. It had been close, and he had definitely not foreseen the intervention of an S-rank kunoichi, or that of several A-rank shinobi. Sasaki was out of reach for now. He would need a new plan. Kusha saw the despicable monster that had tried to hurt her son disappear. She was displeased that he was still alive, but now was not the moment. Slowly, the rage that clouded her mind left her, and the fox's chakra finished consuming itself, letting her fall to her knees with a grunt. However, before she could reach the earth, someone slipped beneath her arm, a blonde head she knew well. "Nar?" she asked weakly, wanting to believe her dreams, but not sure she should. His face rose and his gaze met hers. A smile grew on his whiskered cheeks. His blue eyes were filled with emotions. In the back of her mind, Kusha was happy he had his father's looks. "Take it easy, Mom," he said. She could see in his eyes a warmth that matched the one she felt in her heart when he called her that. "You just fought an S-rank new cannon after waking up from a 13-year-long coma. You need to rest." The duration of her coma hit her like a train, but she took a deep breath to calm herself. "All right, thank you." She looked around at the forest of death. "The heck are you doing in there?" "Chunin exams." "Oh, I interrupted something," she said sheepishly, rubbing the back of her head in an eerily familiar way. "I don't think anyone's going to be pissed at you," said Nar with a smirk. Just before he was bopped on the head. "Language, young man," she said sternly. "Yeah, sorry, Mom," said Nar, rubbing his neck sheepishly. Ma'am," said Enko nervously. "We can't exactly stay there. We're disrupting the exams. And I get it. Diplomatical _ Storm said Kusha before being bopped on the head by her son. "Language, Mom," he said with a wide mischievous smile. She mocked glared at him, an amused smirk on her lips. "Cheeky brat. Anyway, I'll see you at the end of this phase, son. Hurry up, will you?" She was slightly afraid of being alone with only her thoughts of how much she had missed in Minato's death to keep her company. She saw her son nod and turned to follow the horribly scantily clad young woman. Seriously, what were kunoichi thinking these days to wear so little? Oh, great. Now she thought like a senile old woman. The coma. Nar looked at his mother as she jumped into the trees with the proctor while the other Jonin returned to Konoha. Kakashi and Yugito left with a thumb up for them while the others looked at them in a bit of puzzlement. No surprise there. They had been fighting a member of the Sannin for an unknown period of time. Nar knew that his little charade was down, but hopefully some of his opponents wouldn't see past it. "What scroll do you have?" asked Sasaki, looking at the Kumo team. "We have 2 heaven, 1 heaven, said Hinata. "We should team up. We would go faster." "Agreed," supplied Nar, all the others nodding. "Now, why don't you use those lovely eyes of yours and tell us where the nearest team is?" he said with a charming smile, making Hanabi roll her eyes and Hinata giggle. Shikamaru was frozen, as was Ino. How did this happen? Why were they doing this? An hour ago, they had crossed path with another Konoha team, and they had decided to team up even though they didn't know each other. After all, they were comrades. They definitely hadn't seen the whole taking Choji hostage thing coming. One of them threw a rope at Ino less than greater than S feet. Now Yamanaka, you're tying the Nar up. Ino looked at Shikamaru and he stiffly nodded. They had no choice. Ino took the rope and tied Shikamaru up, discreetly making the knot loose so he could free him. Then their assailants tied Choji up. Ino though she would then be tied up. But and now the fun begins, said the leader as they came closer to her, cracking his knuckles, causing Ino to shake in fright. Shino was sweating. He had just witnessed the merciless slaughter performed by the Sand team on an AIM team. He gently pulled on the shoulders of their teammates, trying to coax them into leaving. Kiba seemed still frozen in place, looking at the blood in shock and horror, while Yukumo was quickly weaving through hand signs, hopefully to provide cover while they retreated. Sand was coming their way. They had to leave quick. Yukumo finished casting a genjutsu and gazed at him urgently, already flashing through a new set of seals. In desperation, Shino pulled Ka on his shoulder and took to the trees. Quickly, Yukumo caught up to him and they ran at top speed to escape. They had their scrolls. They had to get to the tower. What did you do? Asked Shino in a stressed voice. Area of effect, genjutsu. It should disorient them a bit and hopefully make them go a different way. But I wouldn't bet my life on it. Shino nodded. The spawn of the betrayed land. The ancient trees. That's what it meant. Shino pushed more chakra in his legs and accelerated even more. Yukumo struggling slightly to keep up with him, but not complaining. She didn't want to attract the attention of any predator roaming nearby, especially not the Sand Genin. Shikamaru was crying, both because of the pain and because he had to watch his friends get beat up. Ino had gone first. She was whimpering on the ground, covered in bruises, her upper lip busted and bleeding profusely. She had a black eye. Shikamaru had been next, and he was pretty sure he had a few broken bones. Shoji was being beaten right now. He was spitting blood and crying out in pain as one of their tormentor crushed his hand beneath his feet. He could do nothing. They had tightened the knot around his wrist. He couldn't escape and he was forced to watch his best friend get beat up. Between horror and pain, he couldn't focus on his chakra despite how much he wanted to. If he had trained more, it wouldn't have happened. The three tormentors threw Choji back with them. Oh, how Shikamaru wanted to wipe these smug smirks off their faces. You know we're less than greater than doing you a favor, said the leader. If you're that gullible, you don't deserve to be Chunin. He swiped his finger across his headband, and the leaf was replaced by the Kiri symbol. And since we were nice enough to give you a good lesson on being a ninja, how about she thank us? Huh, he said, eyeing Ino like a piece of meat. Something snapped inside of Shikamaru. Fear the shadows. The three missed. Shinobi turned to him with surprised faces, clearly not understanding his clan's motto. They would. In an instant, his shadow exploded outward, ripping his bonds apart and wrapping around the closest one. Choji suddenly increased in size, tearing the rope to pieces and slamming his enlarged fist into the other goon, sending him flying into a tree, cracking the bark and something else, if the wet cracking sound was anything to go by. Shikamaru quickly paralyzed the leader and cut Ino free with his shadow, glaring darkly at the two surviving mist ninja. See, come on. It was a AJ joke. Why you didn't be believe we'd our real Ellie do that or right, said the leader pitifully. Shikamaru less than greater than S answer was to squeeze his shadow around the goon's neck slowly, mercilessly until the head and the body fell in two different directions. He was about to kill the leader when Ino stopped him. She looked at the boy and smiled widely. You know, I never tried a mind dive before, so I could kind of mess it up. But don't worry, it won't be too bad. Just excruciating pain before turning into a vegetable. She slapped her hand on his forehead and purposely messed the Yamanaka mind dive technique up, sending their tormentor and her would-be rapists' mind through a psychological blender. When his screams of pure agony stopped, he was nothing more than a drooling mess. She didn't care. She pulled an earth scroll from his pouch and, trying not to think too much about her first kill, turned to her teammates. We don't have time to wallow in grief, we go to the tower. I'll schedule an appointment with my dad for all of us once we get out of this mess. Shikamaru looked at her. He could tell she was putting up a strong front, but so was he, and so was Choji. Without another sound, they left the clearing where the remnants of their childhood innocence laid. Nar pulled his blade from the corpse of the aim genin with a sigh. Third team they met. Third team that wouldn't surrender. Had to kill them. He didn't particularly enjoy it. Too much wasted efforts. He looked through this one's possessions and a smile grew on his lips. Guys, Earth. Yeah, exclaimed Hanabi happily. That makes two. We can go to the tower now. That came as a relief. They had closed in on the tower and scoured the woods for teams, relying mostly on the twins by Akugan, and then proceeded to ambush two ambushed teams. Irony is so fun. It was pure luck that the two teams they had ambushed had both Earth Scrolls. Quickly they all darted for the very close tower going through the entrance. Once there they took a look at the riddle, quickly came to the obvious conclusion and opened all the scrolls. Two Chunin appeared and began to lead them to quarters where they would be able to rest for the duration of the exams. They made their way through the corridors of the tower, climbing several flights of stairs until they reached a level that quite obviously consisted of room after room and one big infirmary. They were each assigned a room and given some time to rest. Nar showered quickly and got dressed again. He expected his mother to come and see him soon. He smiled when he heard a knock on his door and opened it, only to be surprised by the presence of an Ambu behind it. Utsu, Maki-san, Hokage-sama wishes to talk with you. If you would please follow me. Naruto nodded, stepping out and locking the door before following the Ambu to the office used by the Hokage. Inside, he found Serbi seated behind his desk and his mother sitting in front of it. When he came in, he noticed her red eyes and the tear stains before he was pulled into a bear hug. He returned the embrace, trying to keep his happiness at having his mother back and healthy in check. The meeting had to be important. He couldn't let himself get distracted no matter how much he wanted to. He heard his mother muttering something along the lines of, "Jiraiya's going to get his sari kicked." After Kusha calmed down, she returned to her seat, still anxiously keeping an eye on him. And he sat next to her, hoping to calm her down at least a little bit. "Thank you for coming so fast, Naruto-kun. Now, I wanted to wait until you made Chunin to tell you, but with Kusha-chan here, I know you will be well protected. It concerns your father's identity," he said. Nar remained impassive, then nodded. "Your father was Minato Namikaze, the Yandai Hokage. The reason we kept it a secret was because of the danger you would be in if word got out. I hope you can forgive me." Nar remained silent, slowly processing the information. "I see." He took a moment to consider all the possible implications and quickly reached the conclusion that his father's identity was, at least for now, useless on a political level. Though on a personal level, it did feel good to know who had worked with his mother to bring him in this world. He felt his mother's hand land on his shoulder. "Are you all right?" she asked. She probably still felt awkward. She had prepared herself to take care of a baby, not talk with a young man. "Yeah, thanks for telling me, old man. I'll still need some time to get used to it. Did you bring Mom up to speed on everything that happened?" "Yes." Nar nodded. Is she staying at the tower? I'd like to spend some time with her. Serbi gave a benevolent smile and nodded. Her room is next to yours. Thanks, old man. He turned to his mother, seeing her look at him uncertainly. He gave her his best smile in an effort to cheer her up. So, want to go grab a bite? Hopefully, we can catch up a bit. Kusha nodded eagerly, impatient to get to know her son better. The Hokage gave them leave, and they went to the cafeteria of the tower to eat and talk. Fu looked at the team in front of her, 3 genin from Kusa. Her team had made it quite clear she'd have to do the fighting, probably in hope of seeing her get hurt. They weren't stupid enough to let her die, but they wouldn't lift a finger to help her if they had any other option. No matter. The leader charged in, screaming something about having his fun with her, a psychotic look on his face. She sidestepped him, pulled a canny out of seemingly nowhere, and slammed it in his skull, piercing his brain. She looked at his 2 teammates. They were paralyzed. Never seen death, huh? She said uncaringly. Her teammates hadn't either. She, on the other hand, knew it quite well. Along with the type of fun they wanted to have with her, dark memories bubbled to the surface, old pains flaring up. She suppressed them quickly. Any chance of convincing you two to just give your scroll and leave? The 2 Kusa genin looked at each other, and to her surprise, they looked quite relieved. The scroll is in his pouch, said the kunoichi, smiling gratefully at Fu. Thanks for killing him. He was a complete psycho. The only reason he was in the force to begin with is due to a lack of candidates. Fu nodded and pulled the heaven scroll out of the dead boy's pouch. Just the one they needed. Good. Well, we less than greater than LLB moving out now. Good luck getting out of here. Thanks. Good luck to you too, said the other Kusa boy, waving his hand and jumping away with his teammates, making his way to the outskirts of the forest. Without another word, Fu jumped into the canopy, her teammates struggling to follow her, and made her way to the tower. Heya breathed deeply, trying to get a hold of himself and stop his hands from shaking. His team had stopped for the night, thinking it better to hide in a hollow trunk and wait for early morning before sneaking to the tower. He didn't really have the occasion to express his opinion. He was still paralyzed when they had taken this decision. He gritted his teeth. He was supposed to be the top dog. And here he was, shaking like a freaking leaf, while his teammates showed no trouble whatsoever. He felt some resentment towards Shino for always taking the lead and especially for always having better ideas than him, and towards Yukumo for being a better ninja than him even though she was physically weaker. And now this, he was born to a family of ninja. He wasn't a stranger to the concept of death and he knew he'd have to kill. But seeing death being delivered in such a brutal way and with such obvious glee, that Gar Kid was beyond nuts. But it didn't excuse him freezing up. He should have been stronger than this. Heya, are you okay? He turned to Yukumo, glaring harshly at her, baring his teeth. Leave me alone, he almost yelled, only for Shino to come and smash his fist in his face. As he sat up to yell a few choice words to the Ibarame, he was startled into silence by the almost palpable aura of anger around the cloaked teen. Heya, you will listen and not interrupt me, he said in an arctic cold voice. He could only nod. First, I don't care for your wounded pride. Right now, we're in enemy territory, and your outburst could have attracted enemy teams to our location. Second, you have no right to talk to Yukumo in such a way, and if you do so again, I will personally break both of your arms. Am I clear? Heian nodded dumbly, having troubles believing that Shino of all people had just formulated a threat, and against him nothing less. He lowered his head, locking his gaze on the ground, and heard both of his teammates walk away and settle a bit farther. He couldn't blame them. He had acted like an idiot. He wasn't sure he could get any rest this night. Sasuke contemplated this new situation. While he was jealous of Nar for having his mother back, he squashed this feeling in favor of studying the situation rationally. If Nar was dangerous before, he was doubly so now. It was quite obvious that his mother was a high-ranking kunoichi, strong enough to push Orochimaru back despite being in a coma for 13 years. That meant a slew of nobles owed her favors. He would have to make more research on Utsuaki Kusha. But he could already tell that Whirlpool was now an impossible target for him. That left one option: make do. If he couldn't protect the Uchiha influence as it was, then he would have to extend it, gain what influence he could to make up for what he lost. It could prove tricky. Civilian nobles held contempt for their shinobi peers, and the few noble shinobi clans were already in an established balance of power. For now, the arrival of the Uzumaki clan had changed the situation. It was just beginning to show, and the full extent of the change wouldn't be seen until the end of the year, when the impact of the changes brought by Naruto would be clearly seen. Sasaki couldn't allow himself to wait this long. He was especially well placed to know the potential impact the new player could have. He would have to form an alliance, even distant, with his teammate. The Konoha Mercantile Guild was not even an option. They had the unpleasant tendency of trying to take control of every economical activity of any clan that made an alliance with them before slowly taking them over completely, leaving the clan ruined and dependent on them. A good example of that would be the Yui clan, who lost what little land they had to them. Sasaki sighed in exasperation, massaging his temples. Things were going downhill, both personally and politically. It seemed that Lady Luck had a huge crush on Nar and had decided to shower him with her favors. And, considering the fact he was interested in the Hyuga twins, Luck wasn't jealous. Sasaki tiredly laid down on his bed, trying to think of a way to gain Naruto's trust without compromising himself too much. He couldn't find any, and it irritated him beyond anything before. He paused in his thoughts, and realization hit him like a train. When had besting his blonde teammate become more important than avenging his clan? Shikamaru unfurled both scrolls, his expression grim. He hoped he was right. Because if they were expelled from the exam, he could never forgive himself, especially after they had to go through so much pain to pass. He watched the smoke rising from the ceiling array impassively, did not relax when a Tunin appeared, and carefully listened to what he said. He relaxed only when he was certain they would pass to the next phase. He helped Ino along the way. One of her legs was broken and they had only realized after the adrenaline had faded, but she was pulling through incredibly well. Probably Yamanaka mental training kicking in. He wished he had that kind of training. Choji probably wished the same. They hadn't been able to sleep well since it happened. Between being forced to see their childhood friends get beaten right in front of their eyes and having their first kill, it was hard to cope. Shikamaru pulled through by sheer strength of will and by hyperationalization. But he knew he would need psychological help. And soon Choji was just following his lead. He stepped into his room, closed the door, locked it, sat on his bed, and collapsed crying. Sakura was resting on her bed looking at the ceiling unseemingly. She was deep in thoughts. She wondered how Ino was doing, if she'd have the occasion to rekindle their friendship, if maybe she could get closer to Yukumo. God knew she didn't have enough female friends. She idly wondered why her mother had been telling her to try to get Nar into an association with the Mercantile Guild, especially why she was so insistent. She shrugged the question, often focused on the exams, wondering idly who would pass. By now, it was almost guaranteed that there would be matches, probably in front of a jury, whether those matches were individual or team versus team. She didn't know and honestly didn't care. She knew that none of the Konoha teams had a chance against them. With a sigh, She let her mind wander again. Yukumo sighed in relief when the Chunin told them they had passed the second phase and would be able to rest until the end of the delay. She took a look at both of her teammates. Heya was still angry at his reaction and still slightly shocked by the execution they had seen. He would probably try to find a way to re-establish his top dog position. Probably by attacking a weak target, that Nar kid they had seen at the beginning of the exams, if she had to guess. Wasn't he the one that had been called Kitsun? Strange. And her father had told her to keep an eye out for him. Yet he seemed completely harmless, out of place even. What do you think, Ito? No idea. Maybe he's hiding his strength, but then that Kabuto guy would have had more information on him. He did seem well informed after all. Yeah, you're right. I guess we'll have to see. I just hope he doesn't end up facing Ka in the next few days. I think he'd completely destroy him just to restore his own confidence. That teammate of ours is sickening. Yes, but we can't do a thing about it. And maybe he'll change. Remember that we're far more mature than him. Maybe. I wouldn't put our money on it, though. Atsui looked out the window, gazing at the sea of trees. It was so different from Kumo. There wasn't that many trees back home, just breathtaking landscapes with cliffs, rocky peaks that tore through the clouds, and various geological formations. But he could see why one would love to live here. It gave off such an aura of life. He wondered if he'd be assigned to diplomatic duty in Konoha. He hoped not. He really didn't want to be sent away from his sister. Thinking of Simui made him smile. She was studying under one of the strongest ninja in Kumo, Killer B, the Rakuja's adoptive brother, and would no doubt become very powerful. Maybe the sisters could get him some training time with Konoha's Kenjutsu users when they settled here. After all, even if Hanabi always grumbled about his speech pattern, they were friends. At least he thought they were. Maybe they'd even invite him to their wedding. Shino looked at the forest deep in thoughts. The spawn of the betrayed land was the child of the desert, Gar. It made sense. A betrayed land could have been deserted, and those predictions were never upfront. Then what to make of the rest of the prediction? It worried him greatly. He wasn't all that talented to see through those riddles. He was a very rational man. He sighed, letting his mind wander, and without surprise, it focused on one green-haired girl. His thoughts often drifted to her lately. He wondered if she was all right, if he would have the occasion to talk to her again, to take their budding relationship to the next level. He knew it was unlikely. Her status probably meant that Taki would never let her go, but he preferred to hope than to give up immediately. Perhaps he could invite her to have a meal with him if she arrived early enough. Fu sighed in relief. She was quite happy to finally be able to lower her guard. Those days in the forest had been excruciating. Normally, her teammates couldn't do a thing against her, but if she died in the forest, no one could have said a thing. They would have had to believe her two teammates. Now she was safe again. She sat cross-legged on her bed trying to meditate. She quickly reached inside of herself, opening her eyes and finding herself on a lake in a cave. She looked around quickly, spotting her prisoner, the mighty Shikai, Lord of the Sky. The powerful being was trapped in a cage of iron, massive chains of iron suspending it from the ceiling and the walls. Even then, he looked impressive. To Fu's surprise, the beast was apparently truly asleep, not reacting to her appearance. It was quite a surprise. Usually, the great beast would immediately shower her inside snide remarks, offensive comments about the human race in general. And even though she would never admit it, those comments were often spot on and had made her more suspicious and helped her to avoid some painful experiences. Taki wasn't very good at protecting their Jinchūriki or simply didn't care. She kept looking at it for a few more moments, wondering if waking it up would be a good idea. Then it jolted awake and immediately focused on her. Yet, it did not talk. Not immediately. After a few moments, a deep rumbling sigh escaped its mouth. "What do you want, little one?" it asked in an almost defeated tone of voice. That caused Fu to raise an eyebrow. "No flesh bag. Well, that's a first. Anyway, I was curious about what you think of this all." A deep rumbling chuckle shook the sheep's shell. "Going to take my advice without admitting it again? Fine. Keep an eye on the blonde one. Girl or boy, leaf or cloud?" she asked, not even bothering to deny the beast's assumption. "The blonde boy of the leaf. He hides much, including my sibling." That made Fu's eyes widen. "Oh, how many tails?" 9. "There is another one. You must beware. The red head of the sand. He bears another of my siblings. 1. Be wary of him. Shukaku is unstable at best, though. After all this time, I don't know if it is by choice or not." Fu paused a bit at that. 3 containers in the same exams. A recipe for disaster, especially if the Suna one was a psychopath. With a sigh, she looked once again at the seal and its manifestation. This massive cage would collapse on itself if the seal was released, sending massive spikes of iron piercing through the shell of the Shi'ai. The seal was designed to send the beast into fury if it was released. She was nothing more than a train bomb. "Why are you helping me?" she asked quietly. "Because you are as much of a victim as I am." What brought about this sudden realization? A talk. And an old memory. "Please don't cry. Okay. Thanks for the advice." They both lapsed into silence, just sitting there deep in thoughts. Back in Konoha, Sake Haruno was deep in thoughts. She wasn't a kunoichi, never had been one, but even she could feel some things, and the shudder he had felt before was a telltale sign that one particular player was back in the game. One she hoped to never face again. For the 3rd time this afternoon, she cursed herself for not having Uzumaki Kusha assassinated. It would have been easy since no one watched over her after her decade-long coma. But she had decided it wasn't worth it. That the red-haired would never wake up. She was wrong. Or at least she thought she was. She was pretty sure that Kosa was back, but she had no way to confirm it. Kusha Uzumaki that had taken Minato away before she could stake her claim on him and forced her to make do with a subpar husband. Minato should have been hers, but he had chosen the brash, rude and unrefined Kusha. A slap in her face, the spark of her hatred. Hell has no fury like a woman scorned. How true. Over the last few years, she had done all she could to get back at the deceased Hokage and unresponsive kunoichi. Using the aftermath of Kyuubi's attack to strip Kusha's student of her lands, subtly using her influence to push the civilians to ostracize their son, telling her own daughter that brutalizing the idiotic blonde was normal and even a good thing until it became a habit, doing 1,000 little things to make his life that much harder. With his rise to power, she had hoped to form some kind of alliance with him to take control of his lands and subjugate the Uzumaki by using his crush on Sakura. How it had thrilled her, the idea of him being at her beck and call, depending on her for nearly everything. How had she not thought about it earlier? But the blonde had denied her, rejecting her offer while slapping her in the face. Metaphorically speaking, of course, she didn't know if he had refused because he knew of her plans or because he simply disliked her. And with Kusha back, there was nothing she could do now. Yusuzu was simply out of reach. Sake gritted her teeth, a frown marring her face. She hated the very thought of Kusha alive and well. She hated the fact she had a son with Minato. She hated the godforsaken idiot for choosing that red-haired freak. She hated their little prick of a son for being so damn smart. And most of all, she hated the fact that Sakura, Her precious Sakura wasn't listening to her as much as she used to. All because of that blonde bastard. Yes, she was a kunoichi and needed to act as one. True Sake couldn't help her on that matter. And never once would she complain about the fact she had picked up in her training. But now she almost had no common ground with her own daughter. They were almost like strangers. If her teacher had been the initiator of this change, it wouldn't have been so bad. But it was because of always him. With a sigh, she sat back down at her desk. There was nothing she could do. Nothing but wait and hope that the damned red-haired fury wouldn't destroy everything she had built. Yuhi Kurana was a reasonable woman. She knew full well that her team had low chances to progress in the exams and had told them so. Ha had of course completely ignored it, but she had been pleased to see Yukumo and Shino take it in and had hoped they would react accordingly with more caution. She had been right. Just a few minutes earlier, she had been told that her team had passed the second phase of the exam and had made her way to the tower via Shunshin. She was currently going to the mess to grab a little bite just to calm her stomach. She hadn't been able to put anything in it due to its constant twisting. So, now that her guts had calmed down, she could eat something. However, just as she entered the mess, life decided that reasonable people were boring and that it was funnier to mess with them. Chan, she was thus promptly glumped by her supposedly Kamiyomao's teacher. Said teacher looked quite energetic for an unconscious woman. Oh, and she was squeezing the life out of her. Sensei, can't breath, huh? Ah, sorry, Kirchin, said Kusha, rubbing her neck awkwardly. I got carried away, Sensei. How did you get out of that coma? Ah, I have my son to thank for that. She answered with her customary bright smile. Kurai had missed that smile. Want to come? I was doing some catching up. And I smiled, and followed her teacher to a table where a blonde boy and two foxy hyuga were sitting. She noted that Kusha was looking at the twins with surprise. Okay, son. Mind explaining why those two were hugging your sides and why they have fox ears? Well, Nar trailed off embarrassedly. Kurana regretted not having popcorn because she knew the explanation would be fun to watch. The second phase of the exams had ended and 8 teams stood before the Hokage. 1 from Suna, 1 from Taki, 1 from Odo, 1 from Kumo, the rest from Konoha. Too many for the third phase. Serbi performed his speech about the role of the exams. A series of preliminary matches was announced and the rules were explained. Nar stood there looking impassively at the John raid behind the Hokage. He had heard about what happened to Team 10. And while he did feel sorry for them, there was nothing he could do to help her. At least they pulled through like true shinobi by gritting their teeth and taking it. With a small sigh, Nar refocused on the speech and went to the balcony above the floor, waiting to look at the fights. The first match opposed Zaku of Odo against none other than Sasaki. Before his teammate could go down, Naruto whispered what he had been told of the boy. Sas, watch out for shock waves from his palms. Sasaki didn't answer, simply walking down the stairs at the end of the balcony, but he did take note of the advice. Nar had made an effort to be discreet. Answering would have ruined this. He stood in front of his opponent, gauging him carefully. He was apparently a mid to high Janine in strength, but surprises did happen. He didn't really pay attention to his boasts and insults, tuning him out and waiting for the proctor to give the start of the match. As soon as the word had left the coughing man's mouth, Sasaki sprung into action, slamming his fist into his opponent with bone-shattering force, sending him flying, probably unconscious. He was quite surprised when his opponent scrambled to his feet, nursing his broken jaw, eyes wide in fear. Zaku raised both hands and aimed them at Sasaki, allowing him to see 2 small holes in his palms. quickly connecting this with the information given by Naruto. Sasaki rolled out of the way just as the gust of wind left the tubes. As he finished his roll, Sasaki sprang forward, sidestepped 3 gusts of wind as he approached and disappeared in a burst of speed. He reappeared under Zaku's arms, sword in hand, and slashed the blade up, cutting both arms in one swift movement. As he got up, he spun elegantly and slashed horizontally, separating Zaku's head from his body and jumping back before any blood could get on him. Once the arena floor was cleared and cleaned, the randomizer did its job again and ended up picking Nar and an unfortunate soul from the Taki team. Nar calmly made his way down the stairs, ignoring Ka as he sent a jab his way. Something about trying to look cool and being a loser. Nar did not care. He stood in front of his opponent, taking him in carefully. He didn't look like much. Well, except his ego, maybe. Ha, you better get ready, weakling, 'cause I'm going to destroy you. Nar smiled lightly when he saw his mother silently fuming up with his team, and the twins looking at his opponent with something akin to pity, but with some amusement thrown in. The proctor gave the start of the match, and his opponent charged indirectly. Slowly, pathetic, Nar pulled his left blade free of its sheath and walked calmly toward his opponent. As he came close, he batted away the fist of the Taki genin with the flat of his blade. Putting him off balance, sidestepped him, and let him fall flat on his face. He spun swiftly to face his opponent again, tucking his right hand behind his back. Well, are you getting up? The genin got to his feet, a bewildered expression on his face. Be it the Inuzuka said he said you were a weakling that you'd lose with one hit. Nar enjoyed the way Ka shrunk when his mother glared at him. Well, let's say reports of my weakness have been greatly exaggerated, said Nar, a small smile tugging at his lips. He felt playful today. The Taki genin grew angry and charged again. This time, Naruto sidestepped him and pocked the genin's back with the pointy part of his half-staff, making the genin jump slightly and yelp. Oh, and it squeals, too. Thanks, old man. It's been a while since my last toy, exclaimed Nar entirely too cheerfully. Up in the stands, he could see the boy's teammate, the Kunoichi, trying to stifle her laugh. Now, that wouldn't do. Say, old man, can I keep it? I'm going to pet it, feed it, walk it, and call it Fluffy. That got the Jinchūriki laughing. More precisely, she fell on her back and howled in laughter, and if his eyes did not deceive him, there were quite a few tears of mirth. His victim, however, was not so amused. With a roar, he charged blindly, only for Naruto to move slightly out of the way and trip him, making him fall flat on his face yet again. Sakura chose that moment to interrupt his fun. Naruto, could you please stop playing with your food? We're waiting for our turn up there. Yeah, sorry. Way to spoil my fun, said Naruto with a sigh, tripping his opponent again before knocking him out with a quick blow to the neck. He was declared the victor and made his way up the stairs, whistling happily. When he passed the Taki team, the green head thanked him for the laugh, and he answered with a nod before making his way to his team. He did send a smirk to Ka, though. Then he settled down close to his team and extremely close to a certain pair of twins. The next to go were Atsui and Choji. Choji looked not too good, seemed a bit light. He had bags under his eyes, wasn't eating, had some bruises, and was unusually pale. Atsui looked at him carefully for a moment. You know you don't look too good. You sure you want to do this? He asked his opponent. Choji narrowed his eyes, glaring at him, and slipped into a fighting stance. Atsui sighed and unsheathed his sword. Suit yourself. The proctor ordered the beginning of the match and immediately Shoji used his family technique to turn into a massive ball of destruction, quickly spinning towards Atsui to crush him. Tay blonde swordsman jumped to the side, dodging the attack and sending the Akamaiki air crashing into a wall. Quickly, Atsui sent pairs of kunai link with wire to block Choji and stop any attempt at starting the rotation. Knew if he hadn't been on an infiltration capture team, he wouldn't have had those and would have found himself pretty screwed over. Shoji undid his technique and landed on his feet, spinning on his heels and pulling a kunai out of his pouch to slash the wire, but found himself with Atsui's sword at his jugular, making him go rigged. Up in the stands, Ino and Shikamaru tightened their grips on the railing. The two fighters remained unmoving for a few seconds, then the proctor called the match. Atsui removed his sword from Choji's throat. "Not bad. You're going to be good one day," he said with a smile. Choji nodded and returned to the stands, still silent. Atsui shrugged and followed. The fourth match was Ka versus Nei. The Inuzuka glared at his opponent, trying to determine whether or not he would win. He knew nothing of his opponent, not even if he was older or younger than him. It unnerved him. He had hoped to fight someone weak to advance onto the next phase. But after Naruto's show, he was now afraid to be the weakest in these exams. It was frightening for someone who, like him, sought to be a top dog. Neji was just looking at his opponent, wondering if his doubts would end the match before it began. The proctor ordered the start of the match, and Ka immediately sprung forward, throwing a soldier pill in the air for his dog to eat. Neji would not have that. With pinpoint accuracy, he threw a sunbi through the pill, pinning it to the wall before charging forward and engaging in taijutsu with the feral boy. His performance was good, but against one as naturally gifted as Nei with the training of the gauntlet to boot, Ha didn't last long. 15 seconds after the start of the match, he was unconscious on the ground. His hound looked at Nei for a moment and then laid down in a show of submission. The match was called. The next match opposed Hyuga Hanabi against Gar of the Sand. The youngest of the twins frowned slightly. She hoped to avoid this kind of confrontation. She could see Hinata and Nar, the worry on their faces. She squared her shoulders and went to the fight. She'd have to act carefully. Once down in the arena, she looked at her opponent. He looked positively psychotic. Her nose could pick a strong scent of blood from him even at this distance. That did not reassure her. The proctor ordered the start of the match, and Hanabi charged forward, unsheathing her tanto and striking only to be blocked by a wall of sand. She jumped back just as the sand tried to swallow her, and stood a good distance away, gauging her options. Her ears flattened atop her head, her eyes narrowed. This fight would be hard. Gar sent a wave of sand upon her. She dodged to the side and dashed forward. She saw another cloud of sand leaving his gourd, blocking her path. She jumped above it faster than he could react and landed right in front of him, swinging her tanto down, but only managing to rip against what felt like a stone armor. Compressed sand, summoning her Beiju chakra to the surface. She slammed her foot in his chest, sending him flying into a wall. She saw the sand rush to soften the impact and immediately dug into her pouch, pulling out a little ball of wrapped black paper and threw it at the genin just as he impacted the wall. A purple cloud engulfed Gar, making him cry out in surprise and subsequently inhale a lot of her poison. Good. Up in the stands, the Suna team was shaking with fear. This little genin was pushing Gar farther than he ever had been. That was an almost sure way to make him lose control. And if he did, may Kami have mercy on their souls. Down in the arena, Gar fell to his knee after dispersing the cloud, coughing violently, spitting blood on the ground. He didn't know it, but the chakra of Shukaku had purged most of the poison from his veins, but he was still affected by some remnants. He looked at the red puddle with shock. He hadn't seen that particular liquid since his uncle had tried to kill him. When he had tattooed that kanji on his forehead ow how, he mumbled dazedly. Fury filled him. He could hear Mother's call. She wanted the blood of the fox _ he would spill her blood, both to make her pay and to please Mother. All the sand that remained in his gourd was pulled out and sent to crush the insect that had hurt him. Hanabi rolled to the side, escaping the tidal wave of sand and sending a kunai with an exploding tag at Gar, only succeeding in making it explode against the shield before jumping away again. The persistent bastard was quite enthusiastic about killing her. As she reached her feet, she summoned her Beiju chakra again, darting forward. However, Gar was prepared and raised a higher wall. Hanabi jumped back and tried to consider her situation. Hinata would be better suited for this. Her lightning technique would blast past the sand with ease. She gritted her teeth in irritation. This would be hard. She caught a glimpse of Gar's face and immediately jumped away just as a spike of sand burst through the ground. She kept jumping back, dodging spear after spear of sand, reaching the wall and climbing it a bit. Sand projectiles were expelled from the sea beneath her, forming a wall of deadly spikes. She wouldn't be able to block everything. She cut the chakra flow in her legs, falling to the sand below and gathering more of her Beiju chakra. As she landed, in a crouch, the sand-made projectiles disintegrated above her and the powdered stone began to move towards her in conjunction with the sand already on the ground. That's when she released her chakra. She threw her head back, letting out an earth-shattering roar as blood-red chakra swirled around her, dispersing the sand, cracking the stone tiles beneath her. Her eyes turned red, her features turned more feral. The Jonin panicked slightly and began prepping the containment seals. She dashed forward. She slammed clean through the first two walls of Sangara raised in his defense, but the third repelled her, even though it was completely blown to bits. Sand began swarming her. She would die if she remained there. She unleashed her tanto and began to jump back, slashing at every tendril of sand that came close to her, but her control on the potent chakra was thin at best, and it was quickly consumed. The sand almost encased her, and in desperation, she pushed the chakra to her legs and jumped. The ground beneath her cracked, as she propelled herself to the ceiling. As she rose through the air, she unleashed a storm of steel upon the unmoving genin, but all of her projectiles were caught by the sand and flung back at her. She parried what she could with her tanto before flipping in midair and sticking to the ceiling with chakra. She panted hard. Using so much Beiju chakra had been quite taxing for her body. She was suddenly hit by a tendril of sand, making her cry out in pain as she was sent flying and crashing into a wall. The fall was hard. She coughed blood. Her right arm was broken and a few of her ribs were shattered. This was bad. The sand was closing in. I give up. The sand kept coming. Her eyes widened in fear and disbelief. Would she really die here? She could see the demented expression on Gar's face. She could hear the proctor yelling at him to stop, but he didn't. The sand was almost upon her. She closed her eyes. Suddenly, what felt like wind passed near her. She opened her eyes. Naruto was there, dancing gracefully, his blades bathed in blood-red chakra, cutting through the sand with ease. Hinata landed beside her, weaving through hand signs for a powerful lightning jutsu, no doubt intent on frying the crazed teen. Enough. Silence filled the room as Gar pulled his sand back, his gaze on the Hokage. Hanabi guessed that the old leader was concentrating his killing intent on the red-haired youth to stop him. And it worked, thankfully. Esser Toby rose from his seat, sending a withering glare to the sand Junin, making him cower in fear. Control your genin. If you don't, we will. Hinata helped Hanabi back up and helped her walk up the stairs, sending a distrustful look to the med nin. They frowned and looked at each other, wondering what was wrong with her. Nar stopped in front of them and gave an apologetic look. Please forgive them. Due to their life in Kumo, they are not the most trusting of people, especially when one of them is hurt. He gave another sad smile before rushing to join the twins. They settled down near Team 7 with Kushina and the rest of Team White quickly coming in. Yugito began fussing over Hanabi, making the young fox girl smile. Kahina wasn't far behind, worrying about one of her future daughters-in-law. Kurenai looked at that from a distance, a smile playing on her lips as she remembered the talk the two UK had earlier that week. Well, Nar trailed off embarrassedly. He honestly didn't know what to tell to his mother on that one. Sadly, the choice wasn't in his hands anymore. We're his girlfriends, answered Hanabi in a tone that clearly said it was the most normal thing in the world. His what? Girlfriends, said Hinata. I realize this is highly unusual, but please Miss Uzumaki let us explain our reasoning. Kusha looked at them for a moment, walked up to the table and flopped unceremoniously on the free stool. Kurenai joining her soon after. Okay. How did this come to be? Mom, did you have dreams during your coma? Yes. Why? Peanut butter, rubber ducky, gunpowder, and celery, said Hinata. Kusha looked at her with wide eyes. No. Oh, sweet mother of who did you use it on? Asked a very giddy Kusha. Hanabi pulled out a notebook and flipped through a few pages. Let's see. January 17th, 2 years ago. Target Rockage's office. I do seem to recall they needed a whole week to make the office usable again. Kusha and Karini looked at each other, struggling to control their laughter. And banned rubber duckies from import, said Hinata in the most angelic voice in her repertoire. That was the last straw, and both older women collapsed, howling in laughter and crying in mirth. The hellish rubber ducky of doom incident was quite famous in Konoha. It took them a few minutes for their laughter to die down. And by now, Kusha had a small amount of fondness for the two girls, so she accepted them far more readily when they explained their story. There was no doubt that Kusha would do everything in her power to keep them safe. Lucky girls, she stepped a bit closer to them, sending a warm smile to her former sensei. Once everyone was certain that Hanabi was well enough, Yugito turned her curious gaze on Kusha. She knew the woman, at least from reputation. She was one of the most powerful kunoichi to have ever graced this world. Said to be Sununade's equal, even her better. According to some, her tetsubo was feared throughout the elemental nations. Even though it looked normal enough, the aura of might that flowed from it was the stuff of legend. She couldn't help but be curious. And since the arena below would need some repairing, they had some time. Kusha-san. Yakitty girl Yugo smiled at the nickname. Well, I am curious about your tetsubo. I knew it was strong, but I never thought it would be powerful enough to snap the legendary Kusanagi in half. That caught the attention of nearly everyone in the room. And if you looked close enough, you could see the eye of the Sanjin widen in disbelief and fear. Kusha smiled widely, obviously quite proud of her weapon. Ah, yeah, she grasped the handle of her tetsubo, who was resting against her back in a harness, and pulled the weapon out, effortlessly, holding it with one hand despite its weight and landing it relatively lightly on the railing, causing a loud metallic sound to resound through the arena. This is Bishaman's will, one of the most ancient and revered relics of the Uzumaki clan. It was found in a dilapidated shrine dedicated to Bishaman during the Waring clan's era. No one really knows where it comes from, and not even the most senior seal masters of my clan were able to decipher the matrix on the weapon. They called it a thing out of this world. And considering the kind of crazy underscore my clan could do with seals, that tells you a lot. I went with a Konoha squad to retrieve it after Yusuzio less than greater than S fall. Found it in an emergency storage by pure luck. But Kusanagi was said to be indestructible, muttered Yugo. Just the arrogance of the Snake clan talking. Good-for-nothing summons. Midito-sama told me they tried to ally themselves with the Uzuki once and that they acted like they were a gift from Kami-sama or something and expected us to bow down to them and give them sacrifices. The clan head killed the boss and told the other snakes to off since then. What he killed a boss summon? Asked Yugo in shock. Kusha looked at her curiously. Yeah, why is it supposed to be hard? But boss summons are all cage level. At least they are, asked Kusha in honest surprise. Strange. In the last war, one killed the bear boss, and it wasn't that hard. What? Yeah. Flaming Tetsubo to the face. And done. By now, every foreign shinobi looked at her in fear and every Konoha shinobi with admiration. Then Kusha looked at the screen. Oh, look, another match, she exclaimed happily, not so discreetly, switching the focus off her, but no one noticed because of the shock. This time, Kurama Yukumo would be opposed to Kinyudosu. The sound genin quickly hopped down into the arena. But before Yukumo could join him by way of stairs, like any civilized person, Naruto positioned himself to remain unseen by the boys. Teammate and sensei. Yukumo-san, he said, catching her attention and quickly giving his message with the Konoha standard hand signs. Hopping Karana had taught that to her students. Good luck, he said with an amiable smile. Yukumo quickly gathered the meaning of the message. Directed Soundwave. She will keep that in mind. Thank you, Naruto-san, she said with a smile, bowing gracefully. She calmly made her way down the stairs, considering what to make of it. Ito-chan, what do you think? Take his advice. We less than greater than LL lose nothing from following it. It means staying at a distance anyway. My thoughts exactly. I know. I'm in your head, dummy. Keep acting like that and no chocolate ice cream for you. No, please. I'm sorry. I'll be good. I know. Giggled. Just kidding. You got a genjutsu prepared. What do you think? Nice. Yukumo stopped in front of her opponent. A small smile playing upon her lips. He eyed her carefully. She noticed he wasn't paying too much attention to her curves, meaning he was either gay or professional. She couldn't tell which, nor did she care. His sleeves were so long they almost touched ground, especially when hunched over like he was. That was an advantage she'd use right from the start, especially since there was a bulge in his right sleeve. His straw cloak could also be used in a most interesting way. The proctor ordered the start of the match. Her body wasn't the most powerful. Far from it. It was even subpar when compared to other her age. But she made up for the lost strength by training her speed and accuracy. In a flash, Do's sleeves were nailed to the ground, and Ito used this moment to cast her technique, using the full potency of the Kurama bloodline to trick the world into believing a fire had started in the hunchback's cloak, quickly turning the ridiculous garment into a bonfire. Do quickly ripped his sleeves and pulled the cloak off before turning a narrowed eye to Yukumo. But it was all a distraction because he found himself faced with a brown-skinned Yukumo charging at him with far more speed than a girl of her size and musculature should be able to muster. He began weaving around the attacks, trying to use his gauntlet to disable her, but finding himself unable to do anything. He saw another Yukumo, the normal one, weaving through hand signs calmly and suddenly felt himself become nauseated, making him stumble. That's when the beatdown began. Yukumo looked dispassionately as Ito beat the mummified team to a bloody pulp. It was interesting to see what an illusionary clone could do in the hands of her lifelong companion. There yet not there. The victim and everyone around was certain there was another Yukumo showing prowess in taijutsu and beating her opponent down. While it was only an illusion controlled by Ito and strengthened with the Kurana bloodline, she winced slightly when Do suffered from a particularly vicious knee to the crotch, making his voice a pitch higher before he lost consciousness. Ito's clone faded into cherry blossom petals that slowly disappeared in a non-existent wind. She loved that part. It was so poetic. She was declared the winner. And Do was evacuated by a group of Maideen, all male, that gave the unconscious teen sympathetic glances. The seventh match's participants were Tenten and Temari of the Sand. Both kunoichi went into the arena and stood opposite to each other. Tenten gave a friendly smile. "Well, let the better kunoichi win," she exclaimed. "Yeah," smirked Temari. "Let me win." That wiped Tenten's smile off. If snorts there was one thing she hated, it was to be underestimated. Well, that would have to change. A sinister smirk made its way to her lips as her hands twitched closer to the storage seal on her belt. The proctor between two coughs ordered the beginning of the match, and Tenten immediately sent a flurry of weapons towards her opponent. Temari batted them aside with a smirk, even closing her eyes to show her contempt. However, before she could utter a taunt, she reopened them when she heard the sound of rapidly approaching feet. Tenten was charging at her, a tetsubo in one hand, a katana in the other. Temari pulled her fan up to push the attack away and managed to deviate the club and dodge the sword, but the impact of the mace rattled her bones in a very unpleasant way. She jumped away and swung her fan, opening it at its maximum right from the start, reasoning that going overkill from the start would take care of the girl. Tenten rolled out of the way and licked her lips. This would be interesting and an occasion to try out one of her latest creations. She resealed her tetsubo and katana, dodging another blade of wind by jumping high and unsealing another of her weapons, a composite bow of dark, almost black wood. Quickly, she drew a string of chakra between the two extremities of the bow and pulled an arrow from the quiver that had been unsealed with the weapon and fired it at Temari as she began to fall back down. She looked in amusement the expression of the baffled kunoichi when the arrow pierced right through the technique, forcing her to roll out of the way. What the hell was that?" asked a shocked Temari. "My arrows are designed to pierce through opposing forces, especially wind techniques," explained Tenten calmly while firing more arrows at Temari. "It's just a matter of aerodynamic and to make sure a scissoring movement of wind chakra can't break them. They are covered in a thin layer of chakra which coincidentally give them more punch." And the experiment successful, Tenten decided that she had played enough with her bow and sealed it again along with the quiver before. Dashing forward, unsealing her tetsuo and swinging it with all her might. Temari hadn't expected the sudden change in tactic and was caught flat-footed, having barely enough time to raise her fan in defense, only to see it give way under the pressure of the war club before she was launched off her feet. She slammed into the wall, coughing blood from the impact, but was forced to raise her bent fan quickly to block a katana strike. To her shock and fear, the blade went almost halfway through the hardened steel armature of the fan. She kicked Tenten in her stomach and quickly determined that beyond serving as a bludgeon, her fan was now useless. Before she could try and plan a new strategy, Tenten reattacked, forcing her on the defensive again. Strike after strike, her fan took more and more damage. The frame was bent in multiple places, deep cuts almost going all the way through the metal. She could not understand. She was supposed to be high Tunin level. That's what her evaluators had said in Suna. How could she lose like that? Suddenly, Tenten's katana flared with chakra, slashing right through the war fan, cutting it in two. At the shock of seeing her weapon destroyed, Temari froze momentarily, making it easy for Tenten to slip the blade through her guard and put it against her neck. "As I said," muttered Tenten darkly. "Let the better kunoichi win." "Winner Tenten of Konoha," announced the proctor, hoping to avoid another mess like the one with the sand user. Thankfully, Tenten removed her sword and sealed it up before making her way upstairs, but not before shooting a last jab at her opponent. "Looks like you're just like your country. Hot air and not much more." Tamari growled in frustration and tears threatened to fall down her face. Never before had she been this humiliated. Her weapon was destroyed, her pride crushed. She would pay. That bun-haired _ would pay. Tenten simply didn't care for the glare the defeated Kunoichi sent her and ignored the cat suit-wearing ones, too. Simply pulling out a notepad. Say, Nar, is Shizuka-chan still using her fans? Yeah. Why, got a new idea. She began to jot down notes and ideas, drawing some doodles to better illustrate her notes. As she settled with her team, her sensei decided to badger her. Tenten, your behavior was most unthful. He boomed. You shouldn't have been so harsh on Tamari-san. Ah, yeah, well, take a look at the wall. Her techniques were aimed to kill. No ally does that. The moment she decided to act like an enemy, I reacted accordingly. She'd better be happy to still have her head attached to her neck. She spat. Stop acting like we're kids playing in a playground. That was serious, and I could have lost my freaking life. With a scowl, Tenten lapsed into silence, not paying attention to Guy's wince. Whatever the guy could think was not her problem. She always found it annoying that he would treat them like kids. He hadn't been as helpful as he should have when she had her first kill. And just to be on the safe side, she had been the one to talk to Nei when he made his. She tsked and returned her attention to her notes. Anger always gave her ideas to make her weapons more destructive. Guy sighed regretfully. He knew he wasn't as good a teacher as he should be to Nei and Tenten, and that he may have encouraged Lee a bit too much even when he was wrong, but that was still pushing it in his opinion. He knew Tenten had the means to escape the techniques and retaliate as she had proven, but it didn't change the fact that he could have and should have better formulated his thoughts. What really bothered him was the taunt she had spoken at the end. He found it quite discourteous to their sand allies. But there was nothing he could do right now. Gecko Hayate's voice cut through his thoughts as he called the next participants. Would Yamanaka Enino and Haruno Sakura please come down? The Pinkett walked down the stairs, sending worried glances to Ino. She did not look good. She had a black eye, many bruises, and she could see that her lower lip had been busted quite recently. There was a stiffness in her left side, indicating she had been quite badly hurt, possibly a cracked rib that she was unconsciously trying to keep calm so it could heal. She was worried. Ino was calmly calculating her chances. It was a new experience to her, and it was proving somewhat hard, but she had to pull through. She could feel Sakura's gaze on her, and when she looked at her from the corner of her eye, she saw worry. It warmed her heart, but she couldn't let it show. She looked at Sakura, unmoving, and even though it was painful, she knew she stood no chance. She had seen just how strong her teammates were. It was only logical to think that she was strong, too. Enoch-chan called Sakura, getting her attention. Do you really want to do that? You're not at the top of your game. I don't want to make your injuries worse. I know Sakura-kun, sighed Ino. She felt happy to have her friend back despite everything. I know I stand no chance, but I want to try at least. I have my pride and I trust you not to take things too far. Sakura nodded, satisfied with the answer, and gave her a smile. The proctor ordered the start of the match. Ino began by throwing a kunai, but Sakura effortlessly batted it aside, not even moving from her spot. That was Ino less than greater than S plan. But as she weaved through the hand signs for her familial technique, she couldn't help but be unnerved by Sakura's complete calmness. She shrugged it off and sent her mind into the Pinkett spirit, preparing to face her plan and overcome her mental AMB. For a second, nothing happened. Then Ino fell to the ground, caught by Sakura before she could hit the cold floor. Gently, the Pinkett lowered her body to the ground and laid it down. Then she turned to the proctor. I'll be back in a moment. She sat in lotus position and began to meditate. Ino looked baffled at the activity around her. She was in a large room that she figured represented Sakura's mind. The complexity of the pathways she saw above her and the number of doors on the walls was testament to the highly advanced mind of her longtime friend. There was a large table in the middle of the room, one that looked like a strategy table, and from what she could see of it, there was a holographic representation of the arena on the table. She saw the holographic Sakura seat in lotus position surprisingly slowly. She looked around, trying once again to understand just why there was a horde of little Sakura running in there. Around her, 4 Sakura wearing samurai armor and wielding naginata were guarding her. 6 other pinkets wearing officer clothing were gathered around the table, silent and relaxed. Near a door, she could see a respectable-looking version of her friend, wearing a red silk kimono and glasses, her hair in a bun, holding a block note to her chest. There were an army of Sakura running around bringing messages from one door to the other, probably a representation of the cerebral activity. The simple fact that said activity was actively represented was a shock, something unheard of before. Then a new Sakura appeared and her guards straightened. The newcomer stepped to her, a small smile on her face. Don't worry, Enoch-chan. Your body is fine. I wouldn't want you to hit the floor and worsen your injuries. Ino smiled warmly at her friend. Honestly, not caring that she was losing or about Sasake's opinion of her. She needed someone to help her. Damn it. And the fact that her oldest friend wanted to do that was a godsend that she wasn't about to reject. Her musing was interrupted when her 4 guards disappeared. What is this place anyway? I mean, I get that it's your mind, but why are there so many you running around? During my training with Kakashi-sensei, I discovered something. My brain is far more flexible than the norm. Remember that inner me I told you about in the academy? You mean it wasn't a joke? Asked a shocked Ino. No, it wasn't. It was an unconscious manifestation of the potential I hold. It wasn't a split personality. More like all my inhibitions given voice and thought. The same thing happened to my memory during the tests all on an subconscious level. I applied the same principle to other brain functions. You mean like a controllable amount of split personalities all working for your betterment? I prefer to think that I fragment my mind and set each fragment to a task. Those 6, she said, pointing to the 6 officers, are my strategizing unit. They each form strategies with the available information and discuss it between themselves. Information comes from the analyzing center and memory. She pointed first to a Sakura wearing a lab coat, then to the kimono wearing one, each standing near a door. And I take it those guards were the mental defenses you raised. Correct. And that steel door with locks and all that. I lock my emotions behind it in battle. That makes me immune to killing intent. Quite useful. There is also the chakra control center over there. You mean you always have a peeve of your mind actively monitoring your chakra level? Damn, useful. Yeah, and it allows me to do some crazy things, said Sakura with a smile. By the way, why didn't I end up here during the first phase? Asked Ino curiously. Then she realized she had said something that could possibly piss off. Don't worry, I knew, said Sakura. I had prepared myself because I suspected you'd get the information from me. Ino nodded. Well, I guess I should return to my body. She shifted uncomfortably. As Sakura-kun, how did Naruto and Sasaki take their first kill? The pinkett looked at her for a moment, a sympathetic expression on her face. Far better than me. Ino looked at her friend in shock. Then she smiled. Say, could we talk once the match is over? Yes, and Ino-chan, of course, smiled. Sakura kindly. They both faded away, and the usual activity of the room resumed as if it never was interrupted. Ino opened her eyes and saw everyone gazing at them curiously. Without hesitating, she rose her hand. "Proctor, I give up." She heard a few groan. People hoped for a fight. She didn't care. That way, she could protect the secret of Sakura's abilities, making her a complete unknown in the next phase. That was good. Sakura helped her get up and walk to the balcony, sitting with her and talking quietly, listening to Ino as she told her of her remorse and the pain she felt. The proctor called the next match. This time, it would be Hinata against the second Tachi Genin. Let's just say the poor guy didn't have much hope. He looked at Hinata slightly frightened. "Why? You won't kill me." "All right. No, though, for your own sake, I would advise you to give up. Now, I am not the kind to go easy on people." He looked hesitant for a moment, glanced at Hanabi, and raised his hand. "I give up. If she's as strong as her twin, I stand no chance." Hinata nodded in satisfaction and climbed the stairs. Returning to her sister's side, the next match was then called with Tsuchichin of Odo facing Naru Shikimaru of Konoha.